episodes, we've looked at how imperialists take our data. We've talked about how they colonized our minds with a like button. We examined how the imperialists use contracts to colonize the internet. We also established how the imperialists, then as now, use the promise of progress to inspire submission. And all of these work together to create a digital society. Today we'll be asking the question, are individuals in the society living in a colony? Are individuals digital natives or are they digital subjects? And we will begin by exploring how societies are formed. Are societies formed when a group of people with similar interests come together? Or are they formed when that group determines who will lead them? Perhaps it is not about the people or the governance structures, but about the time they've spent together. A group of people that have only known each other 5 minutes is hardly a society, right? Alternatively, does consent make a society? Is agreeing to form a society what creates the society you wish to build? According to Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, two influential theorists, consent is what makes a society. It is not enough for a group of people who have known each other for a long time with similar interests and agreed upon leader to be called a society. A majority of those individuals must agree to form a society. They must consent to every change, and it must be informed consent. This means that the people consenting must know what they are consenting to, otherwise it cannot be said that they have consented. This is the difference between the fact of being rained on and the act of taking a shower. Though the material circumstances are the same, water is pouring on you after all, when you are rained on, you don't have a choice. While when you are taking a shower, you have consented to water pouring on you. Well, being on the internet in 2022 is like being rained on, when before it used to be like taking a shower. This is because, as we learned in the last episode, the contracts we sign to use the internet and the devices we access them with are not designed to get us to consent. They are designed to get us to acquiesce. In the absence of this consent and keeping Locke and Hobbes in mind, I will attempt to answer the following questions. Is the internet a society, or are we a group of individuals, like a sack of potatoes? Worse still, is the internet a colony? And is a colony still a society, even in the absence of consent? In order to answer these questions, we must first understand how societies work. And for that, we ought to return to Hobbes and Locke. Both men propose that societies are built upon an agreement between the community and its citizens. This agreement establishes the norms of the society and is premised upon a simple exchange. The community agrees to protect everyone else and realize common goals, and in exchange, citizens relinquish some of their freedoms. This is a social contract. It includes every single member of the community, and they can be explicit like constitutions or implicit like social norms and values. Instinctively, this is an idea we all understand. Even though this bargain is not on a piece of paper somewhere, we all accept and validate it. It's why we as citizens get frustrated when we feel our government is not listening to us, like they've failed to live up to their side of the bargain. However, the social contract itself does not provide a license to govern, nor does it authorize those who wish to govern to do so. Instead, it merely provides the basis upon which government can be created. So, what happens, as in our situation, when government is created before a community can agree upon a social contract? What happens when we cannot reject the social contract we have been given? We become a colony. We are no longer digital natives, but a digital subject. At present, our current social contract for the internet gives us a raw deal. We get the promise of connectivity, access to all the information that has ever existed, and the ability to maximize the potential of each day, in exchange for our data that's worth billions. Our current social contract enshrines the 4 norms of digital imperialism. This social contract was imposed upon us by those who came to conquer the space. Does that sound familiar? Like the pre-colonial natives, digital natives, or us, were not provided with informed consent to the contracts we sign. Contracts that were designed to get our acceptance did not receive our consent, and contracts that imposed private law on a shared public space. just like the British East India Company did in India. Like the pre-colonial natives, the cost of challenging these contracts may be too high for us to bear. And like the colonial natives, we are living in a colony. Actually, not one, but several, each controlled by a small number of companies and even fewer people. In case you've missed the message I'm trying to drive home, here it is one last time. We are living in a digital colony, and colonies are not just made, they are conquered. And almost every colony, including a digital colony, is subject to the same conquest pattern. According to Shoshana Zuboff, this pattern, end quote, unfolds in 3 phases: legalistic measures to provide the invasion with a gloss of justification, a declaration of territorial claims, and the founding of a town to legitimize the declaration, end quote. This pattern is clearly apparent in history, so let's take a look at an example that's close to home. Let's take a look at the Congo and how it came to be the personal property of one man, King Leopold II of Belgium. In the late 1870s, King Leopold II of Belgium hired a legal scholar to provide a learned legal opinion backing the right of private companies to act as if they were sovereign countries when making treaties with later chiefs. Leopold instructed the scholar thusly, and I quote,
"The treaties must be as brief as possible, and in a couple of articles must grant us everything."
And in the 21st century, the agreements we sign consenting to the use of our data are a couple of thousand words long, brief but granting companies everything. After drafting his treaties, Leopold II of Belgium announced his claim to the Congo at the Berlin Conference in 1884. Likewise, after getting our data, CEOs and top-level executives from big tech companies have made comments that can only work if we all agree that they own our data. In 2010, the CEO of Google at the time, Eric Schmidt, made a remarkable statement at a media event in Abu Dhabi.
One day, we had a conversation where we figured we could just use Google's data about our users to predict the stock market. And then we decided it was illegal, so we stopped doing that.
For him to say that, he has to believe, or perhaps more terrifyingly, know, that Google owns the data it collects. And because Google owns it, Google can do whatever it wants with our data, an implicit declaration of territorial claim. Finally, after announcing his claim to the world, King Leopold II built trading outposts along the Congo River to cement his claim. Equally, after declaring that ownership over our data, big tech companies are now planting literal roots. From Google's internet project to build and operate a metropolitan fiber optic network to Huawei's investment in Africa's digital infrastructure, physical markers of territorial claims are present in Africa. Software is also a big part of how these big tech companies establish trading posts. In recent years, companies such as Facebook, Netflix, and Twitter are extending their services into the African digital ecosystem, cementing their territorial claim with an African-based URL. Put all together, the internet is a colony, and we are not digital citizens. Where we were once digital natives, now we are digital subjects. And as subjects, we have no say in how the internet is governed. Instead, a few number of companies govern a large part of the internet. Within 25 years of the invention of the World Wide Web, a handful of private, mostly Silicon Valley companies have become dominant. So much so that Twitter, a private company, banned the President of the United States of America from using its services. This is tantamount to being deported from a nation and losing one's digital citizenship. Now, whether or not Trump deserved it is an entirely separate question from whether or not a company, any company, should have that kind of power. And Twitter is not the only one. Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft, in fact, all big tech companies have the same power. And we do not know how decisions like that are made. Like in the colonial age, there are no public judgments, no appeal processes, no evidence about decision makers' qualifications or freedom from conflicts of interest. And yet, we rely on every single one of these companies to connect with our friends, run our businesses, study, and access the internet itself. These companies are not bound to look out for our interests, not the social contract we envisioned. Their priorities are different because legally they are bound to maximize profit and minimize potential liability. And this doesn't always make for the most empathetic of governance. This has often led to companies failing to preserve and guarantee the safety of their users in favor of short-term profits. Like Facebook in Myanmar, where their failure to moderate content contributed to a genocide, or YouTube in the United States, where their failure to moderate content radicalizes people, turning them away from democracy and multiculturalism and towards nationalism and authoritarianism. What makes this particular lack of public governance and prevalence of private command difficult to justify is the fact that the internet is a valuable public resource. The internet makes people's lives better. In February 2014, Deloitte published a study that found that in India alone, extending internet access from its current level, 15%, to a level comparable with that of more developed countries, say 75%, would create 65 million jobs, cut cases of extreme poverty by 28%, and reduce infant mortality by 85,000 deaths a year. Bottom line, the internet isn't just about money. It's about creating wealth and saving lives. But the same argument was made to justify imperialism in the late 19th century. Sharing modern medicine, technology, and education was said to be worth the brutality, exploitation, and destruction of cultures. But the cost of that imperialism was not borne by the imperialists, but by those they conquered. Likewise, we will bear the cost of digital imperialism, not them. While colonialism itself was brutal, exploitative, and destructive, we received modern healthcare and medicine, technology and electricity. But was it worth it? Are the benefits of the internet worth the cost of digital imperialism? Is it worth letting a handful of companies control one of the biggest spaces in the world? Is it worth letting a handful of companies control the lives of billions of people? These are the questions we ought to ask ourselves as we engage with the internet. Is it worth it? Is it worth not being able to own your own data, to not have a say in the rules you have to abide by, to be a digital subject and not a citizen? Perhaps it is too late to ask these questions, because it's not like we have a choice anyways. To reject the internet would be to reject modern society as a whole, and not many are willing to make this sacrifice. I know I'm not. Are you? Thank you for watching Fool Me Once, and join me in our next episode as we discuss how tech companies are investing in Africa and Asia, priming it for imperialism from the beginning of our technological journey. See you next time.